What if the Squid Game wasn't simply a Netflix series, but something that people had done in real life? It's not just a story-based, anime, or manga, but a terrifying reality for some South Koreans. A place where people were congregated and drowning in debt. A place with bunk beds, white rubber shoes, and strict rules. And yes, there were games. However, these were not your regular games. Life-changing stakes, too high. They were the kind where you couldn't afford to lose. So, who ran it? Why did it exist? Finally, most importantly, what happened to the players? Back in the day, in the 1970s and 80s, way down deep in Busan, there was this place called Brothers' Home, an internment camp that looked like it was a rehab center. Yet what went on behind those walls was not rehabilitation. That was a human rights horror story. Under its authoritarian rule, the South Korean government wanted to purify the streets. They didn't want the world to think they were a homeless nation at the time of the 1986 Asian Games and the 1988 Olympics. So, they removed them. Thousands were rounded up, carted into this camp, and forced into brutal labor. The disturbing truth is that most weren't even homeless. An investigation in 1987 found that only 10% of the inmates were vagrants. The rest, ordinary people, students, workers, even children. There were 20 factories running day and night, run by slaves, the inmates. Escape? Impossible. Guards ensured no one left. They tried to beat, or worse. CNN later dubbed it South Korea's worst human rights abuse. Some South Korean media termed it Korea's Auschwitz. The horrors didn't stop there, however. In August 1982, Brothers' Home refused to investigate the abuse a man called Kang's brother had suffered there. Instead of justice, though, he was silenced. The police then got Kang to meet with Park In-geun, the director of the facility. She had no interest in an inquiry, she was interested in revenge. Then Kang was accused of false allegations, arrested, and penalized with 8 months in jail. Should speaking out put one behind bars, where were the people imprisoned? The atrocities of Brothers' Home had remained hidden for years now. In December 1986, a local hunter in Ulsan noticed something strange. A group of laborers logging on a mountain, being beaten by guards with clubs. The hunter whispered the horrifying scene to prosecutor Kim Yong-won, who decided to investigate. Kim followed the trail back to Brothers' Home, and what he uncovered was beyond imagination. Over 3,000 people had been kidnapped off the streets, locked inside, and subjected to brutal forced labor. He conducted interviews with over 100 inmates, guards, and facility executives. The testimonies revealed that Brothers' Home was not a rehabilitation center. It was a prison for the innocent. Kim's investigation led to a full-scale raid on January 16, 1987. Inside, authorities discovered something chilling, a bank receipt showing a deposit of 2 billion won, about $10.6 million in today's money, proving the entire operation was a lucrative scheme. Brothers' Home was run like a military dictatorship. Each inmate was placed under a twisted hierarchy, with one prisoner acting as the commander. Below him, 120 men were grouped into platoons, each ruled by a leader. If one inmate made a mistake, everyone was punished. But the punishment wasn't just beatings. Guards forced prisoners into excruciating positions for hours, tortured them with electric shocks, and assaulted them with clubs. In 2020, a former inmate revealed that Park In-geun himself carried handcuffs and oak clubs, personally beating prisoners. Some inmates whispered that Park had killed at least 40 to 50 people with his own hands. And then there were the children. According to reports, the inmates of Brothers Home were asked to do tasks. Brothers Home was supposed to correct those before they were released into society. The punishment for not completing those tasks and the punishment was called games. The Daily Mail reported that platoon leaders made the prisoners play a game called the motor vehicle game, with leaders screaming left indicators until their eyes were bruised. Two others were called the Hiroshima Games, where inmates were forced to hang upside down from the rails of their bunk beds and beaten until they fell. A lot died from the brutality, and official records counted at least 551 inmates who missed out. The number could be way more than what was reported. We were surrounded by boys and teenagers in a nightmare that we couldn't escape. They were victims of sexual violence by higher-ranking inmates. A few were labeled as tonto, meaning they were frequently abused sexually. It was beyond words. The trauma they endured. That wasn't horrific enough. They were drugged into submission. A Truth and Reconciliation Commission investigation raised the number to 657 known deaths by 2022. And how exactly did the bodies disappear? Some were secretly buried. Some were cremated and thrown away. And some, horrifyingly, were sold to hospitals for medical experiments. As if forced labor and torture weren't enough, Brothers Home also played a role in human trafficking. Between the mid-1970s and late 1990s, over 200,000 South Korean children were shipped abroad for adoption. Many were labeled as orphans, but they weren't. An investigation found that Brothers Home had sent at least 19 children to the U.S. between 1979 and 1986. The children were funneled through adoption agencies. Their identities were erased. Most ended up in the hands of white adoptive parents who believed they were rescuing an orphan. But in reality, they had been stolen from their families. One chilling case involved a girl named Kim Yuri, who was taken from her parents and sent to France. There, her adoptive father raped and abused her. When the truth finally came out, South Korean adoptees across Europe, the U.S., and Australia demanded an investigation. The agencies responsible, Holt International, Dillon International, and others, were sued for their involvement in human trafficking. Isn't it just like Squid Game? A game, deadly fast, built upon exploitation, and those in power sit by in their power to watch it unfold. We can see it, but we don't even want to admit it, just like the players in this game. But here's the kicker. We're all part of it. Squid Game teaches us how blind we really can be to the suffering of other people, even when we have the person in front of our faces. Children in Brothers Home were just like Squid Game players, just fighting in a crate they couldn't try to escape. Made to live, to give, to compete, forced to perform, just to keep the wheels of the operation turning. It's heart-wrenching, yet it's happening right under our noses. And when you look back, you'll realize you missed it. Now, think about this. If we're still not noticing the suffering right in our faces, how many other stories like this are we missing? And how many other places are phony, helping places keeping people for their use? Isn't that scary? And this isn't just for Brothers Home, but if you think this is the only place abuse is hidden in plain sight, you're wrong. But there's another place that channels this story, where children are being exploited yet again. Want to know where? To find out more, click on subscribe. But this is a story you simply won't believe, but it's happening right now. The thing is, until we start realizing these concealed truths, we'll never really know what's taking place in the world. Like Squid Game, the truth is in front of us, just like they haven't got to mine. It's right in front of us and we're just not willing to face it. And comment your thoughts when you subscribe.